early. I'm waiting for Cyndi Darnell, the fabulous sex therapist. There we go.
Hello.
Yay.
Can you hear me?
Yes, I can hear you. Can you hear
Oh,
me?
good. I can. We had a little bit of a malfunction. We were both waiting, and it doesn't indicate when the other one's waiting. Look at that dress. Look at us both wearing green. We didn't
I
even
know.
plan it.
I know.
How is that?
It's lovely.
How is that?
It gives us the chance to get dressed up, because
Yeah,
otherwise I'm in
absolutely.
sweats with dirty hair.
Yeah, really.
Hello, wife.
Terrible. So
Hello, wife.
hello, wife. Have you had a good week?
I've had an interesting week,
Oh,
but we'll talk about that
oh.
later.
Let's
No,
talk
it's
about
fine.
that later.
Just interesting. But I was just telling everybody that we're going to be busting some myths, and one very interesting one about the clitoris, which
Yes.
I didn't know, and I thought I knew everything about the clitoris, and I felt very irresponsible for not knowing this.
Aw.
But you set me right, and
Yes.
the myth is that I think what we hear everywhere is that the glands of the clit has 8,000 nerve endings, which is twice that of the glands of the penis, the head of the penis. And that's just not
That's
true.
the myth.
It's
That's
the
the
myth.
myth. Yes,
I mean,
it's
we
not
don't
true.
know it to be true. So will you explain why that's not the case necessarily?
Well, because no one's ever counted nerve endings. And I don't even know that it's possible because, we know which nerves innervate the clitoris and the penis. That is the same. It's the pudendal nerve. And the pudendal nerve comes from a Latin word meaning shame, which is fascinating.
That is fascinating.
Yeah, not in such a great way. But that's how old this stigma is about sex and pleasure, that it actually goes way back to Latin origins, that they decided they would even name a nerve structure that innervated our genitals, our pleasure-based genitals, with the same word that we use to talk about shame, which is, indicative really of everything that's going on. So this whole thing about clitoris is having 8,000 nerve endings. There was some report that I recall some time ago about a study of cows and cow clitorises, and there was some connection to a bovine something. But you know what? I don't study cows, so don't quote me on that specifically, but I remember it coming from something to do with cows. And you know what? Human clitoris havers and cows are two very distinct species. So while we're all mammals, which is fabulous, the whole 8,000 nerve endings in a clitoris, and so that's one myth, busted, not true. And the whole thing about it being twice as many as the penis, also not true. What is true is that the clitoris is the most densely innervated genital structure across all the bodies. So what that means, there's a ghost in my room. Sorry about that. Some stuff was just moving around. That's really kooky. What it does mean is that because the head of the clitoris, so the actual clitoris itself is like about this big, so it's about 3 or so inches, or for everybody else on the planet, it's about 7 to 8 centimeters, sometimes 9 centimeters, and it looks like that, what Elle is showing. And the head of it, the glands of it, which is the little bit at the top there, that is very densely packed with nerves. So the same amount of nerves that exist in the head of a penis, which is significantly bigger than this, are spread across in this tiny, tiny little area. So that's where I think folks get confused, that they say, oh, well, there's more, but they're packed in this tiny area. There's not more. There's probably about the same. As far as we know, it's about the same, but they're just packed into a much smaller area. Therefore, the implication is that the head of the clitoris is going to be super sensitive, which it is. So that's that first myth busted right there.
Yes. It kind of blew my mind because I remember learning this in my certification, and my certification is a well-known, SPICY is a well-known, sex education training ground.
Yes.
And I've also heard it from other people that I deeply respect. And I think it's one of those things that we just hear over and over again. We just assume is true because we're hearing it.
Well, that's how myths start, you know. And so for folks who are maybe not familiar with the extent of my work about erotic anatomy, I have an online course called The Atlas of Erotic Anatomy and Arousal. It's on my website. Just go to my website, cyndidarnell.com, and you'll see it there listed under the online classes. And the reason that I made it was because there are so many myths about pleasure, about how the body works, and the Atlas of Erotic Anatomy and Arousal is specifically about our genital anatomy. Pelvises in general, penises, clitorises, vaginas, anuses, the whole thing is covered in the Atlas, because I wanted to give information to people about the body through a pleasure lens, not a reproduction lens, because this is really crucial, because most of us know where babies come from. And of course, that is not even entirely true these days, because people have babies in lots of different ways. And so the Atlas doesn't even teach about reproduction. It teaches about pleasure. It teaches about function. It teaches about arousal, which is also something that you don't get taught in sex education. And it's how important it is to making sure that we have pain-free sex for people who want pain-free sex, which is not everybody, but for those who do want pain-free sex, this is how you learn how to do it. And so, you know, in my Atlas, I made a point of researching this piece about the 8,000 nerves, because I had seen that too. You especially see a lot of stuff on social media where people are just pulling things out of the sky and they think, well, you know, 100 people have said it, so therefore it must be true. And unfortunately, a lot of the stuff that you see on social media is well-intentioned, let's say, but it's not necessarily credible. And it's always really good to check and make sure that the information that you believe is true is really is, you know. And so when it comes to deciding, you know, 8,000 nerves or not, no one's life is going to end whether or not there's 8,000 nerves. But in the bigger scheme of things, it's that kind of, you know, misinformation that ends up becoming something that doesn't really even need to be a thing.
Yeah, and you know, I think just on the matter of the Atlas that you have, it is something that I go back to over and over again, and clearly miss this part, but but I go back to over and over again, and they teach this Atlas in many different certification courses and somatic courses and courses all over the world. It's really an amazing piece to own and be able to reference, not just if you're a sex educator, but if you're just interested in pleasing yourself and pleasing your partners. So anyway, that's my tip for today.
Yeah,
as it were.
Nice.
No pun intended.
Yeah.
So thank you for that, Cyndi.
No problem.
I appreciate it. So we got a few questions, and one of them that I think is another thing that people tend to not understand is, are vaginal orgasms a thing? And
so go on.
No, go on.
Did you want to?
Where I was.
So are vaginal orgasms a thing? So the answer to that is yes and no. What all orgasms have in common is the brain. So if the brain is not on board, no one's having any kind of orgasm. So can you produce produce orgasmic sensations through the vagina? Yes, you can. But generally it will not be with a thrusting motion. So that means, you know, a dildo going in and out is probably not going to produce an orgasm. That means a penis going in and out is probably not going to produce an orgasm. However, fingers moving in a scooping motion could produce an orgasm. And the reason why is because, again, anatomically, structurally, you're accessing the back of the clitoris by using a scooping motion and generally speaking, it is, from an anatomical point of view, it is the clitoris that will be what is going to be a facilitator of orgasms in people with vaginas. But in particular, what also has to happen is the brain has to be on board. So this is why also some of the research shares with us that people who have had spinal injuries, people who have been in various accidents, people who have lost sensation in their pelvis, for example, will sometimes, not always, but sometimes report experiencing orgasmic sensations from having their thumb stimulated or having a different sort of, a shoulder stimulated, something like this, because the brain is constantly rerouting itself and rewiring itself in order to be able to move sensations through the body. So is it possible to have a vaginal orgasm? Yes, it's possible. I mean, anything's possible, but it's very rare.
Yeah.
Yep. And it almost exclusively will not happen from penis and vagina sex. It needs a different kind of stimulation. It needs a different kind of activity, and also it needs arousal, and that whole process of arousal takes time. So it's, for a lot of folks who think, why can't I have an orgasm from having penis in vagina sex? Because penis in vagina sex is not designed to produce orgasms for the vagina ever, unfortunately. And again, that's not to say that it's not possible. It's just highly unlikely given how the anatomy works.
There are some people I know with vaginas who actually come from a thrusting motion, but I think that also has to do with the clitoris and indirect stimulation, not of the glands, but of the part of the clitoris that goes around the entrance to the vagina. Yeah. But it's like you're 3/4 more likely to come with, clitoral stimulation than you are through thrusting. And with your fingers, correct me if I'm wrong, your fingers have more dexterity, so it can get into places that the penis can't, or a dildo can't. So
and the fingers can apply a lot more pressure.
Yeah.
Whereas a penis doesn't, and a dildo don't apply pressure unless, with a dildo, especially if you're using a scooped one or one that's kind of weighted. So I think that's why a lot of folks tend to lean towards the glass dildos and the steel dildos, because they tend to be heavier and they're very hard. And they use them kind of with a scooping sort of motion. But again, that only feels good if you're turned on. If you're not turned on, if you're not aroused, it can feel like a medical exam or being at the dentist, which again, if you're into that, cool. But for those who are not, it's pretty unpleasant. So
yeah. I know some people with vaginas who use a curved steel butt plug, because the curve gets them at the back of their vaginas and from the butt, and and the weight of it feels really good.
Yeah, so, I think sometimes it's the weight can be one of the things that facilitates a vaginal orgasm. So going back to that myth, is a vaginal orgasm a thing? Kind of, but not in the way you think it is the answer to that myth.
Okay. The other question we got was, is it a thing that you can have too many sex partners? And there's tons of myths around this one.
There really is.
Yeah.
So in terms of it being a thing, I mean, it's a cultural thing to have too many sex partners, but in terms of the data and the science, no, there's no such thing as having too many partners.
And so, in that vein, we can talk about slut shaming and that kind of thing. But I think a question I get a lot too is about the stretching of the vagina, and that having so many sex partners will stretch it, in the same sense that having many babies will stretch your vagina in a way that it won't be enjoyable for a penis. Anymore.
And it's interesting because that's that notion of, if you have a lot of penises in your vagina, then you're going to stretch it. But if you have the same penis multiple times, it won't.
Right.
which is like, huh,
Yeah.
how does that work? You know?
Yeah. Yeah. Exactly.
And the thing about vaginas is, I mean, you know, they do stretch, like but that doesn't mean that they stretch out of shape. They're not like,
Right.
you know, old jeans.
Right.
They're
Right.
designed to expand. Like that the vaginas are for expanding, you know. So whether it's, you know, toys, fingers, fists, babies, whatever going in or out, that's vaginas are built for that.
Mm-hmm.
And so this notion of a tight vagina, which, you know, is really based on a very kind of heteronormative notion of penis and vagina sex and the degree to which it feels nice for the penis haver, not
Mm-hmm.
for the vagina haver. So
Right.
any of these things that you see about tightening surgeries and tightening creams and tightening whatevers to restore quote unquote virginity, it's all horse
Or
shit.
yeah.
It's just not true. Mm.
And the laxity one might feel, the vagina haver one might feel, that usually has to do with the pelvic floor, correct?
Yeah, so I mean, giving birth vaginally multiple times is going to have an effect somewhat on the tension in your pelvic floor. But it's important to understand that the pelvic floor is a complex web of muscles that wrap around the entire genital area, including the anus. And so if there has been, you know, trauma and if there's been a surgery required there, if the perineum, which is the extra muscle layer, so there's a pelvic floor, and then there's a perineum layer, which is another layer of, you know, tissue that sits underneath that. So during an episiotomy of a vaginal birth, if they need to cut that in
Mm-hmm.
order to get a baby out of a vagina,
Mm-hmm.
then obviously there's going to need to be a surgery to stitch that part back up. But that is done in order, you know, for the birth parent to go back to having, you know, a healthy kind of life, not for
Right.
anybody to stick their dick into it.
Right.
So
Right.
you know, but in terms of vaginas kind of losing any degree of you know, teenage tightness or something like this, I mean, this is just it's just not true. Vaginas are designed to open and close, and if you want to maintain pelvic floor well-being and pelvic floor health, you do exercises, you do activities like Pilates, you do activities that engage the entire pelvic floor. So Kegels are not enough. Kegels are not going to keep your vagina tight. So stop, you know, buying into all of that. The Kegel works only one muscle group of the pelvic floor, of which there are many. And also, you don't want to have a super tight vagina, because if your vagina is too tight, it's going to hurt and you're going to have trouble with any kind of penetration anyway. So I really want to invite folks to let go of this whole notion of a tight vagina and just be a vagina owner if that's what you are, and it's going to be just fabulous.
And if someone is telling you that your vagina doesn't feel tight to them, that's more their issue than anything else. There's nothing wrong with you.
No, there's nothing wrong with you. Then that becomes a different conversation about what produces pleasure and what things you can do together in order to produce more pleasure for a penis, because, you know, then you can use your hand or your mouth or that sort of thing. And also too, I mean, for penis havers who tend to masturbate a lot, the dexterity that you get with the grip of a hand is not going to be mimicked by a vagina, because hands and vaginas have different capacities. They do different things, right? So if you are a penis haver and you're really accustomed to masturbating with your hand, or even with a toy, and then you have sex with a flesh vagina and it doesn't feel the same, that's because it doesn't feel the same. It just doesn't, right?
Yeah.
You know, and so if you want to get used to having orgasms with a flesh vagina, hold off the masturbation for a little bit, hold off with the using of the toys, allow your body some time to, you know, build up a little bit of juice again, and over time you will retrain yourself to experience the sensations of pleasure from penis in vagina sex, if that is your jam. And if it's not your jam, that's also okay. You can, you know, part of this too is letting go of this overemphasis on penis in vagina sex for everybody. It's really really overemphasized in the same. No one benefits from the pressure of that kind of narrative, you know.
No, and in the same vein of what you were talking about, people that worry that people with clitorises who worry about using a vibrator too much, they'll get used to the vibrator and desensitize it, and then not be able to come during sex with their partner without a vibrator.
And so, yeah, well, and that, I mean, in terms of the myth where people are like, you know, can I break my clitoris from using a vibrator? No, you cannot. So that's that myth. However, there is an element, and often this is the thing with myths, they're stemming from a place that there is an element of truth to it, but the way that it ends up getting pushed around in society is not true. So can you break your clitoris using a vibrator? No, you can't. Can you become very accustomed to orgasming only with a vibrator? Yes, that is true, but it's not permanent. So if you are one of these people who is very accustomed to coming with a vibrator, you can, the same with the hand thing, you just take a break for a few weeks and you retrain your body to get used to different kinds of sensations, and it will begin to reroute itself and allow for orgasmic sensations to be produced in different ways, different positions. All of these kinds of things can be relearned and rerouted. We get stuck into a groove, our brains, in contrast with our minds. So the brain is a thing and the mind is a separate thing. They're not the same. So what our mind wants and what our brain does is different. So the brain gets very accustomed to things being in a particular way. And so it kind of is used to this repetition, this habit, and then it almost sort of just goes offline until, you know, and then the stimulation becomes sort of autopilot. And then any change that you try and bring in, and the brain goes, you know, it's asleep, and then it's like, huh, what? Yeah. And so there's this new interesting thing happening. And it's not that the brain doesn't like it, but it just doesn't know what to do with it. And so it takes a little while for the brain to go, oh, I know what you're trying to do. Let me just catch up. And that can take, you know, it can take weeks in some cases, but there's no risk of permanent damage from masturbating or any of these things.
It's different. I mean, it can take
but
me
just
3 days.
Let go of the idea that you're broken or there's something wrong with you like that. I've been doing this work for 20 years and I've never met somebody who's physiologically sexually broken. Not one person.
No.
There's no such thing.
The last question, I think, which is a really good one, is I'm a gay man who watches straight porn. Am I straight?
Not if you think you're gay. Yeah. Because he said, what did I'm a gay man, right?
I'm a gay man who watches straight porn. Am I straight?
No, if you say you're a gay man, then that's what you are. Identity and practice are not the same thing. So if you identify as whatever gender, as whatever orientation, as whatever kind of person, that is something that is meaningful to you, and it's based on your experience of yourself and your understanding of yourself. It's not based necessarily on who you have sex with or what you do with these people and any kind of, you know, performance or behavior. So watching straight porn is not an indication that you are straight any more than a straight person watching gay porn, that it's necessarily an indication that they are gay. Also, you know, bisexuality exists too. So there's that, but they didn't ask about that. So we'll put that to the side. But, you know, just saying. So, so no, for if you're a gay person watching straight porn, sometimes, always, occasionally, whatever, no, that does not make you straight. It just means that it's a thing that you enjoy watching. I know a lot of women enjoy watching gay male porn.
Yeah.
And that doesn't make them gay men. You know, what we like to watch in our porn consumption and how we identify and even what we like to do are all quite different things. And they can inform each other for sure, but they are not absolutely, you know, hand and glove. They're definitely, you know, there's lots and lots of room for variation and variables in there. So
what arouses you is not your identity. They can intersect.
No, well, I mean, and your identity is way more nuanced. I mean, your identity is how you move through the world. Your identity is how other people see you as well, to a degree. It's you know, it's about a much more rich relationship to yourself, to your personality, to the communities that you inhabit. And it's so much more than what you do in bed. Like, and for a lot of people, what they do in bed and how they identify in their day-to-day lives, even that part is not necessarily the same. So this whole thing of, you know, straight sex and gay sex and queer sex and this sex and that sex, and, you know, yes, they exist, but identity and behavior are not the same thing. They are separate things that can coexist, but often they don't. And that is part of human sexuality.
I love these discussions. I do.
I love them too. I love them too.
I love them. This is one of the reasons why I wanted to do the series with you, because I always learn something. And I don't care how long you have, what you call yourself, whether you're certified or not, or how long you've been doing this, there's always something you can learn, and there is always something you've gotten wrong or you don't know. And it's important to read, listen, watch people who are smarter than you or know more about a different subject. And that's why I so enjoy this with you, because you are all those things. And that's it, you guys. Stay tuned, because we're going to be doing something next Friday, but we just haven't decided on the subject yet.
Let folks put in some ideas. Do we have any comments here? Let me. I can see a couple.
Let's see.
Hang on, I'm just scrolling. I haven't got my specs on. Cheapers creepers. Quick Six, that was great. Oh, thanks, Quick Six. And then here's somebody else saying, current partner, unwanted pregnancies with his ex, claiming pre-cum was to blame. Compatible. I've heard time digesting it. His sex I'm not sure that I understand that question.
I don't understand it either. Let's see. Take on obsidian eggs.
What's my take on the obsidian egg? So obsidian is a stone, like you know, with the jade egg, I guess, is a variation.
Right.
I mean, you know, they're fine. They're all right. Like, I mean, they're not going to transform your world, but if it's meaningful to you, and you like using obsidian eggs or jade eggs or stone eggs, you know, they're fine. You have to be very diligent about cleaning them, because they're porous, and it's understood that porous items in the vagina are not great. So you've got to watch out for things like BV, bacterial vaginosis, and that sort of stuff. You're probably going to be better off with a silicone covered weighted something that you can sanitize completely. But yeah, I mean, if you like using those kinds of stone toys, go for it. Just know that there is a bit of evidence to suggest that they're not especially hygienic, but it's up to you.
If you have a moment for another question. Someone has asked, how can my husband and I get our attraction back after being stuck inside during COVID? So stressful and not feeling sexy. And if you want to, you can go back and watch our half hour on desire. On the desire,
on desire. I would think that would be a good thing to do. That is on that's on your Instagram, I think, the desire one. But all of these end up on my YouTube as well. So if you go onto my website, cyndidarnell.com, you'll see the little tab there for YouTube, and you can catch up on all of these ones that you missed. How do you rekindle desire after COVID? That's a big question that we don't have time for today, but we sort of covered it in the desire one. So go back and have a look at that. Any other myth busts that folks want to bust? Oh, we were going to bust a nut about blue balls. Let me tell you about blue balls.
Oh, yes.
Is it a thing? It kind of is a thing, actually. So blue balls is a thing. However, it doesn't mean that anybody has to have sex with anybody else in order to eradicate it. What it does mean is that there can be an excess of tension in the penis and the testicles if there's been blood in there for a long time, and it can start to get a blue kind of tinge because there's a lot of blood, sort of, you know, anywhere that's got a lot of blood in it is going to change color a little bit. But guess what? You can eradicate it by masturbating.
Right.
So no one has to have unwanted sex with anyone to eradicate blue balls. You can just jerk off and sort yourself out. Problem solved.
Problem solved.
So, yeah.
All right. Well, thank you, Cyndi. And stay tuned to both of our Instagrams. We'll be we'll be posting about what our next subject is and getting questions from you guys. But
yeah.
Thanks a lot. We'll be posting this too on Cyndi's YouTube. And if I can figure it out, on my Instagram live and my stories. So that's it. Thanks, everyone. And we'll see you next week.
Yeah. Same time next week. Thanks for coming.
Bye.
Bye.